The following is part of a 7-episode miniseries featuring a select group of 500 startup portfolio companies that participated in the Alibaba eFounders initiative. The entrepreneurs, who were all from Southeast Asia, visited the Alibaba Business School campus in Hangzhou for 11 days earlier this year and were coached directly by Jack Ma and his team. Welcome to the Jay Kim Show, Hong Kong's first dedicated podcast on investing in Asia. Join us as we survey the land and discover the greatest companies and most profitable investment opportunities in Asia. If this is your first time listening, thank you for stopping by. This podcast is produced every week with the goal of providing actionable insights to you, the listener, with every single episode. And now, onto the show. This week's show guest is Magellan co-founder and CEO of Acudeen Technologies. Acudeen Technologies is an online peer-to-peer marketplace for receivable discounting in the Philippines that provides accessible financing to underbanked SMEs by letting them sell their receivables from multinationals and blue-chip companies to Acudeen's financing partner network. Magellan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jay. Thanks for inviting me.
Good to have you on. And for the audience listening in, maybe you could give us a little bit of a personal background, where you're from, what you did beforehand, maybe some of your academic history, and then your career history that led you up to becoming an entrepreneur.
Got it. Well, I'm from the Philippines. I grew up in Manila, and my background essentially is from college until my master's. I took up entrepreneurship and being exposed to the business world as early as my teens, I was really struck by the idea of having my own business after graduation. So before even graduating, I was already telling my parents that, hey, I want to be part of our family business afterwards. So when I had the opportunity, initially my first training was being part of our family business, which supplies to large companies. And after that, I realized how big of a problem receivables are for small businesses, since it was a big problem for our family business as well. And it became the precursor to what is Acudeen today.
I see. So it was a direct pain point that your family business was experiencing that led you to starting the startup. So I think it's pretty cool, Magellan, that you sort of have always wanted to become an entrepreneur. You knew that, you studied it, and here we are. You have become an entrepreneur. So for some of us that aren't familiar with how receivables financing works especially for SMEs, and how important cash is and cash flow. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a background on that world, because I think that for many people, this is something that they have never heard of, or maybe have never experienced because they've never actually run a small business themselves.
Sure. So receivable financing is essentially an alternative way to get financing using invoices or other forms of receivables like POs that are essentially assets but are not liquid. Normally, these are due in 90 days, 120 days. So the thing about SMEs, it's hard to get financing from traditional means. Like if you go to a bank, you're a 2-year-old business, especially in an emerging market like Philippines, it's almost impossible to get a decent loan or a clean loan. And more so, they would a lot of banks would require you to give a hard collateral like real estate. But if you're starting a business, normally you wouldn't have any valuable asset that you can collateralize. But if you would look deeply into the balance sheets of small businesses, about 35%, and this is true for Southeast Asia, are unutilized receivables. So if only these SMEs can use these receivables as some sort of collateral or even as a tool to get financing, it would really create a very inclusive environment for small businesses.
Right. Okay. Okay, so that's a pretty straightforward explanation. Perhaps to exemplify that, maybe we can just run through a very simple example. Perhaps even using your family business of how that would actually work in real life. So you mentioned that your family business was you were a supplier.
That is correct. So, as an example, we used to supply the pills used for medicine. So, we supply to large pharmaceutical companies, and a lot of these are multinationals. But typically, these multinationals will impose a 90-day payment term, or worst case scenario, even a 150-day payment term. And as a small supplier, you have essentially no power to negotiate this term. You just have to abide to it, especially if you want the business. And
So sorry to interrupt. So basically, what that means is you have to send them the pills, basically, or the goods, and then you don't get paid for that until 90 or up to 180 days afterwards.
exactly,
Right. Okay. So this creates quite a bit of a lag as far as your cash situation, right?
that is true. It's a massive cash flow gap, and a lot of SMEs experience this.
Okay, great. So let's continue with your example here. Okay, so let's use your example. You're supplying these goods to these large multinationals. You're experiencing a lag in your basically you're getting your payment on the goods delivered. You're experiencing a lag, which can really be detrimental oftentimes to smaller businesses, especially when they're they need the cash. So let's talk about how your company now, Acudeen, will help solve this problem.
So, how we're able to solve this cash flow issue for small businesses is we allow them to utilize our platform to reach out or to connect to funders like financing companies and even banks who are looking for loans or loans to give. And the thing is, we make it easy for them to be bought, their invoices, their receivables, because we essentially do the due diligence for the banks. And
Mm.
within the same platform, the transaction happens. So we also help in the facilitation of the transaction. So at least when they upload, let's say, a receivable, and then after doing our due diligence, in the same platform, they will be able to get the funds, or at least the action to buy the receivables happens within the platform, and they get the money within 3 days or less.
Okay, wow, that's pretty good. So Acudeen is the actual technology, it's the platform that connects the SMEs to the funding side, right? The lenders.
That is correct.
Okay, great. So let's continue on with this example because I think that this is the best way for the audience to understand how this works, this mechanism works. So, or the technology rather. So, okay, let's say Magellan, you're working with your family business and you're experiencing some frustration because there's a say a 90-day lag between your the cash that you're receiving for the goods that you shipped out. So you turn to this hot new startup called Acudeen. What walk us through the user experience? How do you actually onboard to the platform or apply for to receive cash for your invoices?
Sure. So as a user, you have to create an account with us. So if
Mm-hmm.
let's say you are a small business, you go to the website, register, and we essentially do a KYC, a know your customer process,
Mm-hmm.
wherein we ask for your business documents, we ask for the owner's identification, and we create a profile for you. And it would normally take us a day to authenticate some of the documents, like let's say your business registration and all. And after that, once we approve your account, you can already start uploading receivables and contracts that you wish to sell in the platform.
Mm-hmm.
And once you upload these invoices, immediately you'll be given like a cost to it, because we charge a discount for these receivables. So, for
Right.
example, if you upload a $100 invoice,
Mm-hmm.
you will be given an option to sell it at, let's say, 95,
Right.
and let's say you agree to the rate. The funders will then start to bid on it, and let's say if one of the funders buy it at $95, you get the $95 straight to your bank account within 3 days or less. And what happens is, let's say after, if it's during 90 days, after 90 days, we collect it from the SME's client directly.
Hmm.
And once we collect it, obviously it's going to be $100. We give it back
Right.
to the funder. So the funder essentially makes $5 out of that transaction. But at the same time, the small business gets the money in advance, which most likely he needs for his working capital.
Right. Okay. Yeah, okay. That's a great example because it's very clear. So a couple questions off of that. So first of all, how do you, as a middleman, now what is your revenue model? How do you collect fees on these transactions?
Our revenue model is based on usage. So we charge tech fees on both sides. So we're true to our model as a marketplace. We essentially have two customers, both
Mhm.
the sellers and the funders. So we charge a rate for when you list a receivable, for example. We charge a fixed fee uh, of $5. And for example, if you are a funder, we charge an origination fee. So essentially, by bridging these two customers, we make money on both ends.
I see. Okay. And so you don't actually touch any part of the actual spread based on the bidding. You just literally just charge fees on each side, a true sort of marketplace framework, right?
Exactly. To the point that the funds that flow through our platform, it does not even flow through our balance sheet. So it's a pure marketplace play. And what we just did is we created an escrow facility for these funds to move from one participant to another.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And then the other question is, so on the funding side, who is eligible for to be applied to be a funder? I mean, is it restricted to sort of larger institutions and banks and lending type companies, or can it even extend to sort of investors? Because I mean, I can see that this could be a quite a lucrative, a shorter term investment for maybe a family office or this type.
Absolutely true. I mean, we're all about inclusivity. We made sure that the platform is open to funders, even to individuals who are willing
Hmm.
to buy these receivables.
Yeah, it's definitely a very it's kind of a niche play space that not a lot of people know about, but I think it's very unique, and I think it's actually it's very interesting once you kind of understand the basics of receivables financing and this sort of thing. There's one of your competitors that we've had on the show up here in Hong Kong. They're called Cupidal. I don't know if you've heard of
Very
them.
familiar with
Um,
our with Cupidal.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, yeah, I guess you would be because there probably aren't that many in the space, but yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. And I love the business model, and okay, so quickly back to the example. So your company, you have say 90 days lag. So I jump on Acudeen and I basically upload my invoice for $100 because I need the cash right away. It goes out, I guess, to the auction after I get through the onboarding and KYC and this sort of thing. Once I have my account set up, I upload. How long does the time between upload to actual hitting the auction? How long does that take?
That takes less than 24 hours. But
Okay.
one key ingredient that we have is we have existing relationships with a lot of these large companies based in the Philippines. So a number of these businesses were actually integrated to their ERP system. And that makes it possible for us to verify and validate invoices to some extent, almost real time for some
Right.
cases. And for those without the ERP integration, the relationship with the big companies makes it possible for us to verify within one day.
I see. I see. And now, so once the invoice is uploaded, is there a time limit on the auction? As in, let's say it's a very stable business that a lot of investors are interested in, and the bidding starts at 95, and it slowly starts ticking up. Is there like a open window, and then the auction closes, or does it? How does that work?
So we normally run auctions for invoices on. We have a time limit of 9 hours,
Hmm.
and aside from that, normally even before, because we allocate like a floor price to the discount. So when it reaches the uh, uh, floor price for the discount rate, it normally ends ahead of the 9 hour timeline.
I see. So I guess that makes sense because if it would, I mean, it would get to a point where the discount wouldn't be large enough that it would be worth anyone's time. So I guess there's a cap, right?
Exactly.
Okay, I got it. Okay, and then so that's pretty interesting. And then as far as how do you deal with the rare occasion where perhaps the multinational or whoever is actually paying the money, what if they're delinquent on their terms? So let's say it's 90 days and they still haven't paid. What happens in that situation?
Two things that we did to mitigate this risk. The first
Mhm.
one is before an SME even sells an invoice, we already know the payment behavior of whoever the client is. So,
Right.
example, if it's ABC, if the receivable is from a multinational, and we know that that multinational pays 45 days late, we already incorporate that 45 days in the pricing and in the expected time before it gets paid. So we allocate that allowance.
Hmm.
The second thing is, let's say, okay, we allocated 45 days and it still
Mhm.
didn't get paid. Maybe there is a there's just a process issue or whatever. We have an insurance component. So if you're a funder, you can trigger that insurance, and essentially it secures up to 90% of what you invested in. But at the end of the day, as of now, we only accept invoices for goods or services that has already been delivered, which means the performance risk is eradicated in this whole ecosystem. So,
Ah,
in essence, the only risk that you have is delayed payment. So, if you
right.
wait for it, then you make more money out of it. But if not, there's always the insurance.
I see. Okay, that's a pretty good backstop then, having that insurance at play. And okay, well, that's great. I mean, Magellan, I think we have a pretty good understanding of how your company works and how the actual receivables financing world works, because I think that could be new for many of our listeners. And it sounds like you guys are tackling a pretty big pain point and solving a pretty big problem, especially in a market in the Philippines that needs it, because I imagine there are a lot of SMEs there that are in need of this sort of thing. Where else are you? Are you just in the Philippines right now, or are you in any other countries? Do you have plans to expand within Southeast Asia?
We're now in two markets, Philippines and Myanmar, and we're about to roll out Q1 of 2019 in Indonesia and Vietnam simultaneously.
Wow, very nice. Myanmar is that's quite interesting. I'm surprised that was your second market that you went into. I imagine you have some sort of connection or network there.
Exactly. It's more opportunistic than strategic, to be
Mm,
honest. We had the opportunity to work with a VC who was very interested to license our product. And for us, it's a revenue generating activity. And it was a good way to actually test out another market and the best way to roll out in another market. So at least for us, it's also a means to experiment and learn about the best way to roll out our product for the other markets that we're looking at.
yeah, absolutely. It sounds pretty. Yeah, I mean, definitely optimistic, but it sounds like a win-win. And it's I mean, I think that it could be an asset as you expand, because there's not very many startups that have actually been able to penetrate that market. I mean, even the multinationals are having difficulty right now trying to get into that market. So very cool, Magellan. So as we look to wrap up our interview, and thanks again for the great overview. I want to switch gears a little bit here. Our mutual friends at 500 Startups were the ones that sort of introduced me to your company, and you're a portfolio company of 500 Startups, and you recently went through the Alibaba eFellows program, and so I just wanted to spend the last couple minutes just asking you about that program, what your experience was like. Were there any key takeaways that you would like to share with the audience from that program?
It was an absolutely wonderful experience. One of the key things that was really great to know and to learn is how massive the adoption of 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 the society when it comes to transacting cashless. Uh, it, Firsthand, I was able to see how individuals in China would just pay using their face for a particular transaction. That's how advanced they are. But I guess
Wow.
the more spectacular thing is how it happened in 5 years. I mean, 5 years ago, it's not like this. You need cash in China, but in just a matter of 5 years, everybody was able to transition to a cashless environment.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. And did they? I mean, Alibaba is obviously the market leader there within e-commerce. Was there strategies that were discussed during the program that would that or any takeaways that they gave you to, specifically in regards to sort of growing your own customer base and integrating sort of cashless payments or anything like that?
So Alibaba lives by this model called the iron triangle. And the iron triangle is composed of e-commerce, logistics, and payments. So
Hmm.
if you've noticed, when they try to look at another market, it's either they approach it starting with e-commerce or with e-payments or with logistics. But the three things are intertwined. Normally, so for example, how did they start Alibaba? They started with e-commerce. But as the e-commerce adoption increases, they started to feel pains when it comes to payments. So what did they do? They came up with Alipay. And then as more transactions came into play, their next issue was that there were more orders, and obviously they had pains when it comes to logistics. So what did they do? They came up with China, and this integrated system essentially made it possible for them to transact millions and millions of dollars in like seconds efficiently. And how were they able to test their capacity? They test it every singles day, which happens in 11/11.
Right.
So that's how they measure whether their capacity for logistics, e-commerce, and payments is efficient enough to cater a big market. So interestingly, if you're a Southeast Asian startup or company and you want to be acquired by Alibaba, you may want to align with either of these three verticals.
Very, very interesting and insightful. I hadn't really heard of it defined as that, the iron triangle. You know, I mean, it does make sense now that you explain it. It makes total sense the way that they've positioned themselves and expanded their business, the verticals. But that's pretty insightful and yeah, great advice to any any startup founders looking for an exit
It's no
in
better
our
to
audience.
exit than be acquired by Alibaba, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Magellan, look, it's been such a pleasure catching up and hearing about your great company. And thanks for sharing your insights. And explaining how your company works. We're excited to see sort of the growth and the progress that you guys make coming up. Where is the best place that people can find you or follow you or learn a little bit more about Acudeen?
Our website is www.acudeen, spelled as Alpha, Charlie, Unicorn, Delta, Echo, Echo, Nancy.com. So if you guys are interested to learn more about the business, just go to our website or follow us in our Facebook or Twitter channels.
Great. And are you on social at all, or I guess you're on LinkedIn? I think
I'm in
I've seen
LinkedIn.
on there.
Just look for Magellan Fetalino.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks again, Magellan. Thanks for your time, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Jay. Cheers, buddy.
All right, take care. Bye. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. All the show notes and links can be found over at jkimshow.com. Come back often and make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Don't forget to join us next week for another exciting episode of The J Kim Show. I'd love to hear your comments. You can find me on Twitter at jkimmer, JayKimmer. See you guys next week. This podcast is brought to you by Hack Your Fitness, the high achiever's guide to getting ripped in under 3 hours a week. If you're anything like me, you're probably working a full-time job or jobs and trying to find time to balance family life, social life, and last but not least, fitness. Look, I get it. I'm a full-time investor and entrepreneur myself, and father of two. So how am I able to stay fit year-round without spending hours and hours in the gym killing myself on the cardio machine? After struggling for the last 15 years trying every workout and diet under the sun, I finally designed a system that allows me to achieve and maintain single-digit body fat for life in under 3 hours a week. Cardio not required. Head on over to hackyour.fitness and download my free 13-page guide that teaches you the simple science behind efficient fitness and smart nutrition and gives you everything you need to know to finally take control of your life. That's hackyour.fitness.